Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and no matter where you are, I have with me two people that need no introduction, which is why I will give them an introduction. And the two people are, we have Joe Pine, the famous Joe Pine, who altered my life by writing a book called The Experience Economy back in 1998. Is that right, Joe?
99.
99, was it? There you
Yep.
go. And I read that and I thought, bloody hell, that's a great thought, and moved on from there. So, welcome, Joe, and Lou Carbone, who's also written a wonderful book. If you haven't read it, you should. It's called Clued In. And Lou, Joe, and I have to say, are friends. Maybe that's too much of a stretch. I don't believe it is. But over the years of working in this space, we've obviously got to know each other pretty well. And whilst we're all in the same industry, we do share thoughts with each other. And today we're going to be talking a bit about what we think next year is going to look like. So, what does 2023 look like? And for those of you that are missing Ryan, my co-host, then tough luck. He's off doing his woodwork somewhere, no doubt, and will be listening to this himself. So, welcome, guys. Who wants to kick off? Who wants to talk a bit about where you think next year's going to be?
Do you mind
Go
if I
ahead,
go?
Lou.
I think that we're at a very, very exciting point and a very critical point. I think what's been so powerful about our friendship and our work is the congruency in many places in terms of the distinction that we see, experience, and see it differently than most people do. And I think that when we begin to think about experience being universal, experiences are the currency of life. And the atomic structure of those experiences are literally clues that are built into the experiences that cause us to have a deep impression. I fear that the work that has been done in the past is still very much based in industrial age thinking. And
Yeah,
Joe, the thoughts that you put forward on time, there was a futurist years ago, to Watts Walker, who talked about the value equation moving from quality over price um, to quality over price times time to the first power times stress. And you're so on the money with where people are living today. And Colin, the understanding that we share on unconscious thought and what I call latent acuity is so critical as we reach this curve. I think there are a couple of things that I would predict. One is the employee experience is a mess, an
yeah,
absolute mess, uh, a total mess. We've got Twitter, which is an example of how to screw things up. We've got Starbucks, where people are trying to unionize,
And Apple as well.
and Apple as well. I think that it's absolutely amazing. We're also in a period of a lack of customer civility. And how do we deal with customer civility? Um, the impatience that people have, the and this is brought out with a frustration in what I call the COVID cop out. I don't know. It is just absolutely terrible. My bank, a 45-minute wait to talk to the bank. Everyone from government agencies, everyone is using the excuse that it's COVID, employee related,
Yep.
and we're beginning to get crappy experiences. And Joe, as you've always pointed out, time is critical. 45 minutes to talk to my bank about a very simple thing, which was just a request for a new debit card.
yeah,
Absolutely crazy. I tried to do it online, couldn't get it done online.
yeah,
Really ridiculous. I do believe that there's going to be a rise in distinctive qualitative research and design built off of curiosity and open-mindedness. These are the two critical aspects that need to open up in organizations. And I think that the frustrations organizations are having with what I would call the homogeneity of approach that is using industrial age perspectives rather than creating distinctive economic value, as Joe has always talked to. Um, I believe that this rise of latent acuity, those things that we don't even know we don't know, is going to become a critical factor in understanding not what customers think, which is where all of this survey work is, to really understanding what we don't even know we don't know. And that's the difference between what customers think about experiences, what employees think about experiences, versus how they think about experiences. So I'm very excited. I think we're beginning to begin to see a shift change. And I also think we're going to see a lot of CX people vanish in companies.
Oh,
Right.
Um,
really?
I do. I honestly believe that the buck stops at the top, and a CEO is the chief experience officer. And there's a need for open mindedness at that level versus living by numbers only.
Yeah.
Because what we've tried to do is create numbers and metrics, and we lose sight of the big picture. And
So Joe, so Lou, fascinating. Okay, and let maybe the if we hear from all three of us, then we can sort of widen the debate out a bit. Joe, one of the things that you and I have often talked about is the difference between your side of customer experience or experience, which is more, I would call it sort of more experiential, more theatrical,
Yep.
etc. Obviously, the whole thing premise behind your book, and my side of it, which is more okay. Well, if you're in a utility and you're in a contact center, then this is what you need to do more. I don't want to say more practical, but it just feels more sort of day to day. How would you describe those differences first of all?
Well, generally, what I say is that the side generally called CX, customer experience,
Yeah,
is about making things nice and easy and convenient. And sort of
yeah,
over the last 3 or 4 years, frictionless has become sort of the watchword of that.
sure,
And the way and which are great things, right? And like you said, with the utility, although I'm actually working with the utility on meaningful experiences,
sure,
but with the utilities and others, it is to get to that level where nothing gets in the way. What Lou's talking about that with this bank, right? They need your CX, right, to be able
sure,
to satisfy Lou and so many other customers. And but with what I talk about is Lou mentioned is distinctive experiences. I often say
yeah,
experiences that in particular are memorable. They have that residue of the memory. Why? Because they engage us, and they engage us in a personal way. Experiences, in my sense, exist inside of us. It's a reaction to the events that exist outside of us. And so you reach inside of people and engage them. And sort of the summary, as Lou mentioned, is all about time. Is CX is about time well saved. Make things nice and easy, convenient. Don't make me
sure,
wait 45 minutes. That's wasting my time, right? It's the worst thing you do is waste people's time. You provide time well saved, and then that becomes a wonderful base on which to provide time well spent. That people
sure,
actually value the time that they spend with you, and I think that's the core distinction. Don Peppers likes to talk about as little X and big X, right? Or
sure,
but more CX
sure,
and experience as a distinct economic offering. I think is the key here.
sure. So, given that, what's your view then of what's your predictions of 2023?
Well, yeah, I always hate making like year on year predictions because nothing ever changes in one year. I mean, if I say it's going to happen
Sure,
next year, well, it's already started, right? And this year,
yeah,
it Adams. I'm sort of a macro guy and what's going on. But that said, one of the things that's in the news right now because Robert Iger just came back to Disney
Yeah.
and in a large measure because they don't anticipate being profitable in their Disney Plus streaming service, and Netflix is actually losing subscribers in that. And I think it shows one of the things from the pandemic is that so many companies, I'll include Zoom here, but particularly in streaming, they just sort of thought that this was a once time change, and it's going to be like that forever, instead of
Sure.
recognizing no, that people are going to go back. I mean, we couldn't experience physical things, so of course we're going to move to digital because we still got to experience something, right? We still got to get our experiences in there. And they missed the fact that once things open up, that people are going to go back. And so one of the things I'd say in particular about 2023 is that we'll see that physical experiences are fully back, right?
Yeah.
That people really don't have any qualms anymore once we get through the flu season. Anyway, I'm still recovering from the flu. If I cough, you'll know why. Even
Right.
though I had my flu shot like 3 weeks ago. Well, yep, sure enough, gave me the flu. But, it we so we you know, after this flu season, things will be fully back. We'll want to go to all experiences. I mean, most all of them are back anyway. One exception so far has been movies, and it's partly because of the streaming problems that they've released their movies on streaming. Knives Out, the latest Knives Out. I forget the name of it, but the Daniel Craig detective movie just came out, and Netflix only put it in the movie theaters for 1 week, but it did gangbusters. It's the number one movie for the week, beating Disney's brand new movie that they came out with that is bombed
Sure.
basically. And so it's really relates to the quality of the movies. If you do not have great movies, I mean, Maverick showed that we'll go back to the movies for a great movie.
Yeah.
So they haven't yet gotten into there where they've created those great movies. But I think that will come. So I think we're going to see that full recovery. And another prediction that I think, and I'll stop here, but I think I can safely make is that, in 2023, every dead artist in the world will have an immersive experience somewhere. And every live artist in the world will issue an NFT somewhere, right? I think I could
Yeah.
be safe in those two predictions.
Is that so? Should I start singing Abba and Knowing Me, Knowing You?
Yes, absolutely.
You don't want me to start singing, mate, I'll tell you.
Okay.
Yeah, so because I think you're right, because I was listening on, I think it was yesterday, them saying that travel is virtually back, isn't it, to pre-pandemic
Right.
levels, or 70%,
Well,
80% back.
Thanksgiving was huge for traffic,
Yeah.
for travel. People, the pandemic did not stop people in any way, shape, or form.
Sure. Okay, so let me give you a view as well then, and my maybe my view is coloured by the fact that I'm spending a lot of time, or had been spending a lot of time in the UK. Okay, because I think it's different, and one of the things that's different is that there is more of a pressure from a economic perspective, okay, in Europe than there is that I'm seeing in the States. So we all know about inflation, we all know about interest rates, we all know about the cost of living. I have to say, and as you both know, I go back and forth between the two countries, the UK and the States. It's a lot worse in Europe than it is in the States. I mean, I find it amazing that I can, I'm here in the States at the moment, and I'm using all my electricity without even thinking about it, which sounds a bit strange to say, but I've literally been phoning my kids on FaceTime, and they're sitting there in their jumpers because they're concerned about the cost of
Heating oil, right?
natural gas and heating and stuff
Right.
like that, and because it's literally gone up like 300%. Okay. And there are people now talking about the difference between heating and eating, or whether they should heat or whether they should eat. So I actually think that I think we're at a bit of an inflection point, and I think that we will look back at 2023 and go, yeah, that's when things changed. So let me give you a few bits of data that are making me think that way. So the American Customer Satisfaction Index, you'll both be aware of, is at the lowest point it has been for 17 years. I think it's, in fact, in the last quarter, it's gone up 0.2 of a point, but it's the lowest point for 17 years. Okay. Um, if you then turn around and say, okay, well, why is that the case? And I love your comment, Lou, on about coronavirus, because people will naturally go, well, that's because of corona. And the reality is, it's not. We actually had the managing director of the American Customer Satisfaction Index on the show a little while ago. And what he told us is that between 2010 and 2019, customer satisfaction, only a third of organizations improved their customer satisfaction. Okay. Which therefore is obviously pre-pandemic. So the interesting bit for me is that tells me that there are 2/3 of organizations that haven't improved their customer satisfaction over that period. So, and that's the period when all this effort has gone into improving the customer's experience. And given the differences, Joe, here that you and I have talked about a lot, which surprises me. Okay, where it doesn't just surprise me, it shocks me, to be totally honest with you, because if you think about the money that's also been spent on voice of the customer systems, then again, it really really surprises me. If you then think about, so that's sort of been bad enough, right? But if you then layer on top of that the bit that we're now going through, particularly as I started this off in Europe, which is all of the interest rates, all of the inflation, all of the recessions that's come in the UK. They're talking about us having the longest recession on record, okay, since history's begun. And just building on Lou's point that he made, Forrester have come out and predicted that one out of every five people in customer experience will lose their job in customer experience next year. And they talk about, yeah, absolutely. And they were talking about the fact that 54% of those people are finding it difficult to justify ROI. So you guys know my background is in corporate life, and I'm very much a numbers man, in the sense of your job is to improve the bottom line. Okay, that's what businesses are in there to improve profitability, and effectively, if you can't prove that you can improve the profitability, the revenue, the loyalty of what you're doing, then to be honest, you shouldn't have a job, because that's what it's there for. I mean, you're not there for any other reason, and therefore, if you can't prove that you're giving ROI and you're in the scenario that I've just painted, yeah, then guess what? If I was a CEO and I was looking at a group of people and saying, what have they contributed towards customer experience? Those would be one of the first people that I sacked, basically, or merged, or moved to one side, or whatever. So this is where I take a step back and I think to myself, yeah, all those things being mounted on top of each other makes us being at this inflection point. And I don't want to go too far out, but maybe 2024, 2025, we'll look back and go, yeah, that's where customer experience changed. And I think you guys have heard me talk about what I think is taking over this whole area of customer science. And I know, Joe, you don't like the word science, which is fine. But the audience will.
I was going to say, it's not just me. There's a basic view that anytime you have to put a word in front of science, it's not a science.
Yeah. Okay. Let's not call it customer science. Customer intelligence, or I don't
Right.
know what you call it. To be honest with you, I couldn't care less what you call it. But that
Right.
sort of amalgamation of AI, data, and behavioral science or behavioral
Right.
economics, those three things coming together, I personally think is that next wave of change that we're going to see overtake. And let me be clear about these words. Um, it's going to overtake customer experience as a wave of change. I don't think
Hmm.
customer experience is going to disappear forever. I think it will be absorbed, just like CRM was absorbed and business process reengineering was absorbed and everything else. But I think
Right.
it's going to be an inflection point. So
Colin,
go on,
I
Lou.
think that what is really so powerful is when we do think about neuroscience and psychology, there is a science that how we process experiences. But I think what is really exciting to me is uh, I think we've all waited 30 years, and there have been a number of academic papers written, but we've waited 30 years for something that recently happened, which is I'm excited that I've been appointed to the faculty as a professor of practice at
Yeah,
MSU.
that's a good point, mate. We should be bowing down before you. You're now a professor.
And it's the very first master's of science degree in customer experience management.
Great.
And I think we've all waited for people to begin to realize that this is all about a management discipline.
Sure.
And I think the recognition of that, I think we're going to be seeing more of that. And I can't believe the senior executives that are signing up and enrolling in this master's program. Um, my hat is off to Tom DeWitt and the folks at MSU. We've been trying to sell this. I started trying to sell that to Pratt at one time. I've tried at MSI, but finally, there's an organization that realizes that value creation in the world of marketing, experience management, and is a critical aspect of that.
So do you think it's just because then that, so I'm big on this bit about the wave of change, all right? Do you think that it's just becoming business as usual now and therefore doesn't need to be discussed as a sort of a separate wave?
I think that there's an acceptance that when we begin to talk about experience, the breadth of knowledge that someone has to have uh, to really look at the full spectrum and look at ROI, look at finance, look at all of these various pieces. And I think that what's happened is people that have been placed in a lot of positions had a very myopic view of what experience management is all about. And it's the ultimate value proposition of the organization. It's that distinctive value that Joe talks about that they're chartered with. And yet they've become metrics driven in terms of net promoter score, sentiment, which is a very shallow understanding of emotion and unconscious framing. So I think the evolution of this work is going to be fascinating as we begin to see more and more adoption of seeing this as a basic management discipline that's required in
But
an organization.
so what would you class as the measurement you need then? Because I mean, any basic management needs, it's classic stuff. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it.
I think the ultimate manager, the ultimate measure is pricing elasticity. In other words, how sensitive people are to pricing, whether it's lower priced or higher priced. If you take Apple and Apple's ability to continue to charge outrageous, outrageous money, subscription base is becoming so big. What's the value that I get? But I'm losing track of subscriptions I've got. I've got subscriptions that I'm paying for that like have been 2 years. I think that what we're going to begin to look at is how do we begin to manage all of that, and do people like Microsoft or Safari see themselves in a role of becoming a um, a companion to sort all that stuff out? Is it
Yeah,
I
you can now buy a subscription to manage all your subscriptions.
exactly exactly? But it's crazy. We're living in a very unique period of time with a lot of confusion built around this fusion, what I refer to as fusionomics, which is the fusion of technology and bricks and mortar and physical experience, especially in healthcare. I find everyone's talking about the humanization of technology, and that's a that is a very critical aspect of healthcare is that human touch.
Sure.
And I think that's one of the great big challenges that healthcare faces in 23 is what will hospitals and care in the future be like?
Yeah, sure. Where do you come at with all that, Joe? Do you think it's just becoming a management, just part of management now, or what?
Well, I've always said that like Luke mentioned earlier, the CEO really is becoming it should be the chief experience officer, and I think when a business is the experience business, right? Like Disney, for example, the CEO absolutely is the chief experience officer because everybody understands they're in the experience business.
Sure.
And so I've long promoted CXOs as an actual position because most companies aren't at that level, knowing that
Sure.
eventually it would get sort of absorbed into. I mean, you talk, Colin, about about being a corporate guy. Well, originally so was I, right? I worked at IBM for 13 years,
Sure.
and that's where I started. And I can remember the whole push towards quality management, right, in the 1980s.
Yep.
And that
Yep.
also sort of got absorbed into everything where everybody finally understood that, yeah, we all got to do quality. It's all part of your job. So you don't need that, that specific focus on it.
Sure.
Are we there yet? I would say it's no, but it's shifting in that direction. I do think that a lot of CEOs are seeing that the numbers they get out of CX groups aren't really making that much of a difference. One of the
Sure.
problems is there's no catalytic mechanism that says when numbers go down, stuff automatically happens, and we recover and we do that and we learn from it. Right? We don't have that level of continuous improvement going on in regards to the experience. So for the most part, there still needs to be that focus. But I think new measures are going to come about. I always say the ultimate measurement is revenue and profit, right? I mean, that's what
Yeah.
the
Sure.
ultimate measure is. And all the
Yeah.
other stuff is it going to help you do that. And revenue and profit, in fact, though, are really a proxy measurement for the economic value you create for your customers, right? So it's
Yeah.
about value for customers that what you offer them is more important to them than the money in their account, right? That's when you're creating economic value. That's the only reason they buy from you because they view it more highly than the money that they have sitting around. So that's
Sure.
what you've got to create is that level of economic value, and a lot of that then comes down to time. One of the formulas I've recently written about is that the value you create and therefore the money you charge is equal to the functionality you provide plus your net value of time. Right. So
Right.
if you waste customers' time, for example, guess what? Right. You can't even charge for the functionality you provide, right? Because people recognize that and they're going to say, hey, this is not worth it because you're making me spend too much of my time on it. If you get to that time well saved level, then you're getting a regular charge for the functionality you provide, whether it's a good service or full experience. But if you provide that time well spent, right, then you can add that premium, right? And that's what Apple does. That people value the not just the apps that they use on their phone, they value the use of the phone itself and how well it's designed and everything. And Starbucks being able to charge a premium for a cup of coffee because of the coffee drinking experience that they provide, not charging explicitly for it. And then there's one other level of after you get rid of time wasted, You provide time well saved, then you add on time well spent. There's one more level, which is time well invested. Time well invested, where people are investing their time to improve themselves in some way. That's where my colleagues and I wrote a January, February article in the Harvard Business Review this year called The New You Business. And it's about how do you create a new you? How do you use the experiences people have to actually transform them into achieving their aspirations, whatever that might be. And any business that's in the business of helping people become healthy, wealthy, and wise, use Ben Franklin's famous formulation, is really in the transformation business and really is offering time well invested. And so I think that there's tremendous opportunities to create more value in that direction, and even charging explicitly for those, like charging for time. We see more and more restaurants and retailers and manufacturers create experiences that they're charging admission for, right? That's explicitly charging for the time. We see more and more companies charging for the outcomes that their customers achieve, right? With the time well invested, with the transformation. Because all that when somebody comes to you and says, like you're a coach, for example, all coaches are in the transformation business, right? And you want improvement on some aspect, all of the things you do don't matter unless they get the improvement, right? Unless they lose the weight, or unless they improve their golf handicap, unless they gain washboard abs. The only outcomes matter. And so ideally you charge for the outcomes. And we're going to see that shift continue more and more, where companies explicitly recognize this is the business we're in, and we're going to charge explicitly for the time that customers spend with us, or for the outcomes that they achieve through us, right? Thanks to our help and guidance.
Joe, my hope is that people really concentrate in organizations on open-mindedness, and that what we're caught in is a world of break fix. That
Right.
what we're doing is fixing broken things and thinking that that's going to lead to distinctive economic value.
And the pandemic broke a lot of stuff, and they're not even fixing it. They're just blaming stuff on it, as you said earlier, Lou.
Sure.
Exactly. And I think that we need to shift from fixing broken. I think of it as an engine in a car. What we're dealing with is the exhaust. And that exhaust, oh, it's broken. Let's fix this. Let's fix that. Let's fix the other thing. What we need to be concerned about is the fuel and the way that the engine works, which will reduce the toxins in the exhaust. And that what most organizations are focused on is exhaust to a great degree and fixing broken things. It's what journey mapping led to. I think that there's got to be a very open mind to what we would call next practices and moving out of the industrial age into the experience economy and the era that we live in.
It makes me wonder whether, if I looked at some of the stats I gave you earlier, i.e., a third of organisations have improved their experience, or only a third of organisations improve their experience. It makes you wonder whether it's just about organisations being more selective about whether they get involved or not. So, you guys know as well as I do that a number of organisations that jumped into improving their experience really didn't know what the hell they were doing. Really, were just doing it just because everybody else was doing it, and really didn't have the commitment or the commitment to actually deal with it. They were just doing it because everybody else was doing it. And it makes you wonder, therefore, whether it becomes a sort of 2023 becomes a more of a self-selecting thing, that the people
Mm-hmm.
that really do believe in this stuff really focus on it, and
Yeah.
maybe it's the 2/3 of organizations shouldn't be focusing on it because they're not really committed to it.
Right. They're not
um,
committed.
and what's therefore they don't see the light, so therefore they shouldn't even do it. And maybe we're sitting here worried about the 100%, or I'm sitting here worried about the 100%, going, and actually I shouldn't be. I should just be going, there's only 30% of organizations that I should be looking at that really are committed to it. And maybe there are certain sort of industries. You mentioned healthcare, I think is an important one, Lou.
Yep.
The should be focused on it more, because that human experience in that environment is more important, rather than a water utility who gets to talk to a customer once every 7 years or something stupid, because the product, you just turn the faucet on and the water comes out and that's it, basically.
Exactly. I think that the healthcare, we refer to it as a healthcare system, and it's anything but a system. The complexity of health insurance. This is not a bill. It looked like a bill to me. There's so many things, and there are cop-outs in terms of everyone has excuses in regulatory businesses. And I don't think that they actually exercise creativity. Uh, when, when I was at National Cars, the VP of marketing, and we wanted to create the electronic rental agreement so that you only signed once, American Express gave us so much crap. None of the credit card companies would do it. They wanted an actual signature. But then what we used was their own, uh, what would be negative, or was their travel and leisure magazine that you would subscribe to without having to sign it, that you would pay a subscription fee for it and never had to sign anything. So we used their own argument against them. And I think that we need to be doing more of that, challenging
Sure.
uh, regulatory agencies.
Yeah, no,
And
you remind me of my time when I was at British Telecom, and obviously regulated market, and the amount of times that people said to me, "We can't do that because of the regulation,"
Right.
and I used to end up saying, "Show me where it says that we can't do that,"
Right.
because what happens is it gets written in folklore, and it just becomes the excuse for not doing things, basically. So I absolutely agree that people should be looking at things from a different perspective. So maybe, guys, what would you suggest that people focus on next year? 2023? What would you recommend that people focus on?
I think there's an examination of conscience for CEOs and leadership in organizations to look at the reality of what they're getting out of what they're doing, and to either make a commitment, uh, or forget about it to a degree. Why waste money if you're not literally creating value? And all you're doing is what was done in the quality movement, which is fixing broken things and trying to save money, which some organizations are even, doing with experience management, where you can fuse lean with experience management. So I really think that it's time to really sit back, both for professionals that are in the business, even our consultant colleagues, to look at what value are you actually creating? Are you creating open-mindedness? Are you really moving this movement forward? Good God, the three of us, I don't want to say how many years, as the pioneers, um, we've been at it a long time, hoping that this would grip. We're
Sure,
seeing signs of it, but it's so damn slow. I hope that
sure.
I can outlive seeing what we have a vision of together. And, I think of us as the three tenors. We should probably sing a Christmas carol or something.
Yeah, the three amigos is how I like to think of us. We just need the sombreros or something like that.
That's right. I
What,
got one somewhere, I think.
what about you,
So,
Joe?
so I build on top of both of what both of you said. Like Colin, you talk about maybe people shouldn't just be doing this stuff. And I would say the value, Lou, that they look at is I would say examine time, right? Which of these time levels do you want to be at, right? Now there's time wasted, and there are in fact companies whose business model is predicated on wasting their customers' time. and healthcare is one of them. In fact, right, is that they're aimed for the efficiency of the doctors, not the efficiency of the patients, and they waste patients' time in order to save that efficiency, not recognizing that there's a balance in there. So says that I think long term that's just not a good business model, right? But long term, you need to at least rise to get rid of the wasting people's time and rise that level of time well saved. But then you have opportunities to choose. And maybe if you stay at the time well saved, then you can tread water on a lot of stuff, and you don't need maybe all the CX people that we're talking about to measure how well you're not doing time well spent and time well invested. But recognize that there are opportunities there that you can go beyond that to build on top of that time well saved, offer your customers time well spent, actual memorable, engaging experiences, and then in time well invested, the question is to ask why. Right? Why are your customers buying from you? And use the old TQM technique again of asking 5 whys. Right? Ask why until you get down to some core aspiration. Well, is that something that you could actually help with? And if so, is that going to be of value to your customers? Are they really going to be able to pay you for that and come back to you again for that? And I think you'll find that very often the answer is yes. There's tremendous opportunities to go beyond what you do today to create more value for your customers and therefore more value for your company.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think from where I'm sitting, what I liked about what you said, Lou, and I agree, is you just need to make a bloody decision about whether you're going to do this or not,
Right.
and whether it makes sense or not. And I have to say, I've said this to people in the C-suite, and if you're not, just don't bother, because you're causing more harm in the organization than you are good by doing something half-heartedly. So for me, Lou, I totally agree. You've got to turn around and make a decision about whether it's right or not. And Joe, I really love the concept of the timepiece, which is again, we've obviously talked about it in the past, but it is absolutely the key. It's absolutely the key area, isn't it? And
And Colin, I'll just add it just for a very simple reason. The most precious resource on the planet is the
is
time
time.
of individual
Yeah,
human beings.
yeah, no, I totally agree. Totally agree. And the other part is just the conversation we've had about the outcome. So whilst I would totally agree that clearly at the top level, it's ROI, yeah,
Yeah.
that you're getting. I think that there are other outcomes that you could look at. So, whether it's subscriptions or whatever. I think part of the problem is that organizations they tie themselves up in knots in trying to justify whose win it was rather than recognize. So, in other words, the marketing team go, wow, it's because we run this wonderful campaign, and the customer experience team go, oh, well, it's because we improve the customer experience. And the reality is well, actually, it's a lot of those things combined, but maybe looking at some different measures. But certainly, the key is you've got to remember that for me, you've got to remember that you are in it to produce something for the organization. And if you're not doing it, you don't deserve to have a job. It's as simple as that.
Right.
And in times of stress, as we are in, then it's going to just become even more exaggerated. So,
Joe and Colin, I think that CEOs need to look at time well spent in CX.
yes, yes, absolutely. Well, I think it is really good that you're now doing this. You're now doing this course, and I'm really pleased that people are signing up for it.
Yep.
And I do believe, Joe, like TQM, and you both, but all of us remember those days. Well, everybody goes, yeah, well, quality is clearly part of it, and you wouldn't dream of ever going back to the days when quality
Right.
wasn't.
Right.
And customer experience, I think, is just going to be the same thing. It's just, as Lou said, it's lasted as a wave of change far longer than I ever thought it would do, to be honest with you. But we shall see what happens over the next year. So, guys, thanks very much for coming on the show. We'll obviously, in fact, let me ask you individually, Lou, where if people want to get hold of you, where we'll put all of this in the show notes. But if people want to get hold of you, where do they get hold of you?
Carbone at expeng.com or carbon26 at msu.edu.
Wonderful. Okay, well, we'll put all of that link in the show notes. And Joe, what about you?
The best is just to go to strategichorizons.com, and there's a contact page where you can connect with us, send an email, or get our quarterly field notes newsletter. And you can also link in with me or follow me on Twitter at Joe Pine.
If Twitter's still around by the time
If
this
Twitter's
comes out.
still around.
Oh,
I have every confidence.
Yeah, same here.
We'll have to do this in person sometime.
We will. Yes, we'll have to do a show. There you go. That would be interesting.
That would
Good.
be.
Okay, everyone. Thanks very much, and talk to you all next week. Cheers.